Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're looking at something that's going to completely flip your understanding of global environmental news right on its head. You know, when we hear the phrase tropical forest fires, we almost instantly picture this apocalyptic scene of total destruction, right? But today, we're diving into why pretty much everything we think we know about those fires is kind of wrong. We'll look closely at the data to reveal a crazy story of hidden corporate drivers and unfairly blamed indigenous stewards.
Okay, let's dive into this. Are all tropical forest fires actually destroying the planet? It's a massive question that totally challenges the global assumption that every single fire in a tropical forest is an ecological disaster. I mean, we've basically been conditioned to see any wisp of smoke on a satellite image as a planetary crisis. But as we'll see, the truth absolutely depends on who exactly is lighting the fire, and crucially, what happens to that piece of land after the smoke clears. Think back with me for a second to August 2019. Remember those visceral, heartbreaking images of the Brazilian Amazon completely engulfed in flames? They dominated global headlines. People were absolutely outraged, and rightfully so. But in the frantic rush to cover the crisis, the media and policymakers actually missed a pretty crucial detail, creating this massive case of mistaken identity. Headlines were throwing around terms like slash and burn and shifting cultivation, interchangeably with the illegal land clearing done by ranchers. And almost instantly, indigenous and peasant farming communities were totally unfairly blamed. They were targeted with state restrictions, while the real culprits, these powerful agribusiness interests, literally hid right behind the smoke and confusion.
Section 1. The slash and burn myth.
So the term slash and burn has honestly become one of the most misleading phrases in environmental policy today. I mean, it literally sounds like a tactic used by an action movie villain, doesn't it? But here's the problem. It unfairly lumps together two radically different land use practices. On one hand, you have traditional rotational cultivation practiced by indigenous communities. And on the exact same label, you have predatory commercial land clearing used to establish permanent cattle pastures. Grouping a sustainable, cyclical farming method together with a permanent, profit-driven extraction model under the exact same phrase isn't just scientifically inaccurate, it is incredibly damaging.
To really understand how we got here, we've got to look back in time. The colonial era actually birthed this myth. Back in the 19th century, colonial administrators conveniently labeled indigenous farming areas as wastelands. Why? Well, just so they could seize the land for themselves. Moving into the 20th century, this exact same framework was used to justify forced resettlements and blanket fire bans. Fast forward to today, and believe it or not, those same colonial-era prejudices are actually baked right into our modern remote sensing and global climate policy. We are literally seeing international climate funds being used to penalize small farmers instead of stopping massive industrial deforestation. It's wild.
Section 2. Two different fire stories.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is swidden, which is the proper scientific term for traditional shifting cultivation. It is fundamentally about cyclical regeneration, not destruction. Think of it kind of like giving the earth a long restorative nap. A small plot of land is farmed for maybe 1, 2, or 3 years, and then it is intentionally left alone for 10 to 25 years. And this rest period isn't just abandoned land, it's a carefully managed agroforestry zone that actively recovers soil carbon, rebuilds seed banks, and supports just an incredible amount of biodiversity.
Notice the stark contrast here between these two things. Swidden focuses on local subsistence and relies entirely on that long rest cycle for ecosystem health. Conversely, commodity-driven, permanent conversion is essentially a linear, one-way street. It's totally driven by profit maximization, producing export commodities like beef or soy with absolutely zero fallow cycle. They use fire as a cheap, rapid weapon for permanent deforestation, with absolutely no intention of ever letting that forest recover. None.
We can actually easily spot the difference just by looking at the scale of the fires and who is actually in charge. Swidden is run by local communities, using deep traditional knowledge on really small, patchy plots of land. Permanent conversion? Well, that is driven by corporate monopolies, illegal land grabs, and massive, endless fields of a single crop. The difference is literally night and day once you know what to look for.
Section 3. The real deforestation drivers.
Okay, so the data here is unambiguous, and frankly, it's pretty shocking. In the Brazilian Amazon, a staggering 75% of deforestation is driven by one single thing: cattle ranching. That's right, 75%.
And a huge chunk of this is tied directly to land grabbing, where fire is used to physically occupy public land and fraudulently secure private land claims. Let me be super clear. This is not being driven by small-scale subsistence farmers. It is being driven by illegal land speculation and massive agribusiness.
The story is eerily similar over in Southeast Asia, too. Between 2001 and 2019 in Indonesia, industrial oil palm operations replaced 2.13 million hectares of forest. Now compare that to smallholders at just 0.72 million hectares. Industrial operations absolutely dwarf smallholder impacts. And this relentless industrial expansion, it leads to permanent biodiversity loss. We're talking severe declines in elephant populations and insect species richness. It's a totally different scale of impact.
And this brilliantly illustrates the sheer scale of the threat from corporate agriculture. 12.4 million hectares. That is the staggering projected expansion of soy by 2050. To put that into perspective, that's an area roughly the size of the entire state of New York. And it's largely targeting Brazil's highly biodiverse Cerrado savanna. This represents massive, permanent conversion deeply embedded in global commodity chains. It has absolutely nothing to do with rotational subsistence farming.
Section 4. The harms of conflation.
So when we confuse these two practices, when we lump them together, the negative outcomes stack up incredibly fast. First off, authorities misdirect their enforcement. Let's be real, it's just so much easier to penalize highly visible indigenous farmers than to tackle opaque, powerful corporate ranching networks. Second, this confusion actually legitimizes actual land grabbing. Commercial actors just hide their destructive fires right behind the slash-and-burn myth. Third, this leads directly to severe human rights violations and forced displacements. And finally, centuries of brilliant place-based wisdom about seed diversity and fire management are just rapidly wiped out.
It all leads to this massive, objective injustice. Think about the ultimate irony here. Our global policies are actively policing and penalizing the very indigenous communities who protect the forest. Meanwhile, multi-million-dollar agribusinesses just completely evade accountability. The wrong actors are punished, and the real culprits walk free.
Section 5. Fixing policy and perception.
Okay, so how do we actually fix this? Here are the actionable steps. Step 1. We have to track the land over time. We need to look at satellite data over a 5 to 20-year period to actually tell the difference between a regenerating forest and a permanent pasture. Step 2. Secure indigenous land tenure. Giving communities formal land titles is, surprisingly to some, the absolute most effective way to preserve sustainable farming. Step 3, we need to integrate traditional ecological knowledge right into our conservation science. And Step 4, regulate corporate supply chains to directly target the real industrial drivers of forest loss.
So the crucial point is that a single snapshot from a satellite showing smoke is practically useless for making policy. Fire is just a tool. Time? Well, time is the ultimate diagnostic tool. We have to ask, what happens to that piece of land 5, 10, or 20 years after the fire? Does it regenerate under community care, or does it just become a permanent commercial monoculture? That is the real question.
Take a moment and really consider this quote from our source material. Traditional shifting cultivators are not the enemies of tropical forests. They are the forest's most effective and knowledgeable long-term guardians. If we continue to criminalize their methods, we risk losing the very systems that have sustainably managed these beautiful, biodiverse landscapes for generations.
We've seen the data, we've unpacked the history, and we've distinguished regenerative stewardship from permanent destruction. So I leave you with this final thought. Is it time we finally look beyond the smoke? Thanks for joining me on this explainer. Keep asking the right questions, and I'll catch you next time.